Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network, folks. We got some great conversations lined up for you. So let me just share with you. First, let's talk about student loans. There have been much discussion coming from the White House about what President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris is going to do to rectify the high student loan rate in this country. However, little is being done, but people are calling for more. We'll have this conversation. Also, huge shortage of black men in the classroom. According to a recent report, only 2% of teachers are black men. What can we do to bring more black men into the classroom? We'll have that conversation later. Should Juneteeth be a paid holiday? Cities across the country are trying to figure out whether this federal holiday necessitates folks getting paid while being off. We'll have that. And later, nightmare at a wedding. How one woman's account of what happened at her friend's wedding led her to not trust her friends. We'll give you the details about that. So we got all of that, and of course, with the last word. So stay with us. A lot is going to be going on. A lot going to be discussed. We want you to join us right here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the show here on Friday, April the 22nd. I'm so happy that you're able to join us today. We got a lot of big conversations, so let's not delay the time and jump right in. First one up, let's talk about student loans. And I'm sure if you've been keeping up with what's happening coming out of the White House, the President Biden has said that he is going to move forward on getting at least 40,000 students to start breaking down repayment plans. Now, the big thing that has come out around student loans is that the extension to pay for student loans has been once again extended, this time all the way until August 31st. Now, this is the fourth extension since President Biden has been in office, and people are asking the question, Mr. President, what about loan forgiveness? What about completely erasing student loans? What about that $50,000 that people have been talking about? Now, there's some folks in the Democratic Party that are saying, Mr. President, okay, if we can't do 50,000, can we get to 10,000? And others are even attaching the student loan debt rate for Black students in particular as being a way to break the curse of generational poverty, and saying that if the president were to deal with the student loan situation, if he does loan forgiveness, if he erase a significant amount of student loans from people's records and help them to get back on their feet financially, that he would be doing a great service in closing the wealth gap in this country. We want to have this conversation with our culture crew. We are joined by young people, some young leaders who have been dealing with the issue of student loans. In a moment, we're going to be joined by Juneteeth Nkwafor, who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. We're also going to be joined by Shaquaya McKenzie, who is an educator and activist, and Oyen Adedoyin, who is a writer as well. So we're going to be joined by them in a little bit. But folks, let's start the conversation here in sharing where we are right now with this whole situation. I want to put up this quote, Keenan, about where we are, because the big conversation that we can see about this whole student loan situation is the fact that there are a number of colleges and universities that are looking forward to this. So here's what Jen Psaki said about the whole student loan situation, that the White House press secretary, she's the White House press secretary, she said on the Pod Save America podcast that a decision will be made on a further extension and possible loan forgiveness before the current student debt payment freeze expires on August 31st. She also said that debt cancellation through executive action is still on the table. So she's saying that this idea of debt cancellation is still there, and that we're still going to, the White House is still trying to figure this out. I want to bring in my voices right now. Let's bring in Shaquaya. We have Owen, and as well as Juneteeth, and we thank them all for joining us, guys. What's your take on this whole conversation about student loans? First and foremost, I'm gonna start with you, Juneteeth, because this has become it's, and I want to say, and I don't, and Oyen, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it seems like the student loan conversation has become also a civil rights conversation. That there seems to be, more focus on student loans, particularly for Black and Brown students, because of the great burden that it has. What's your take on this, Juneteeth?
I mean, everything seems to come back down to some level of civil rights. I like to put numbers into the building so we can understand a little bit further of what we're talking about. When you think about the median Black income, the Black household, it's about $30,000, give or take. And then when you look at the average student loan that a Black person carries, it's about $2,000. You see the disparity there in itself. It's unfortunate that when inflation caused student education prices to rise from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and now today, a lot of access to financial equity was still not in the building as it pertained to African Americans. And it just seems rather odd when, Jen Psaki says something along the lines of, it's still on the table. It just reminds me of that freedom that has been dangled in front of the face of Black people for eons, where it's like, it's so close, but it's not here. We see our government sending billions of dollars overseas to help laudable causes, but these causes have existed for decades, and a lot of which come from inequitable laws proposed by the same government.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I think, Oyen, my tolerance around, big ticket items like this, especially big ticket items that have impacted Black people, my tolerance is very short. I'm noticing that, Oyen. I might have to go talk to my therapist about this, because it's like, just to Juneteeth's point, we'll get to it. And I don't know if the White House truly understands how serious and significant this move would be. Because I was just recently reading some reports. The president could actually put an executive order in place and just make this decision. Boom, we're going to do loan cancellation. He could do that with the stroke of a pen. But the whole idea of getting bipartisan support on this idea of student loan debt, I just don't understand the rationale behind it, Oyen.
Yeah, no, the conversation about student loans has been going on forever. But when we look at the pandemic and we look at the decisions that are being made in regards to that, whether it's freezing student loan repayment or pausing it for a certain degree of time, students, especially those who are Black students and they are members of the Black community and they've graduated from college, they still feel burdened by these student loans. I did a story not too long ago for the Chronicle in about October, looking at a study that an organization called the Education Trust did, and they found that Black student borrowers are still paying off loans at a higher rate, and they're usually paying off more debt in comparison to white student borrowers. And looking at the numbers, Black borrowers and Black graduates, we know they don't make as much as white graduates.
Right.
There is that pay disparity there. So there's all these layers to it that kind of add to that further annoyance and frustration that might come with, the White House decisions of, we're gonna continue to resume these debt repayments on this day. Oh, okay, we're gonna pause it. Okay, we're gonna hit play again. There is an air of uncertainty amongst graduates and borrowers where they're wondering, when is, the anvil going to fall down on me, basically, like, and I'm going to have to repay all this money with interest that I might not have.
So here's the other part about it, and I'm glad you brought that up, Oyen, because earlier this week the president announced that he was going to relieve the debt for 40,000 students, right? And people were saying, okay, and then he was like, yeah, I'm gonna come up with like a repayment plan, and it's like for 40,000 students. What have you been reading or have been coming across? What information have you been coming across in regards to what does this 40,000 student plan actually will do and what it looks like? What have you learned from that?
Well, when it comes to kind of debt repayment plans, one of the biggest issues is access to them and qualifications. And so usually there's all these stipulations around what can you do as an individual to qualify for, whether it's like debt relief that can be adjusted based on your income, or okay, we can forgive a certain amount that you owe. It all goes into policies. So there's all these requirements that people need to fill, and sometimes, even though what's being stated is, okay, I'm going to relieve debt repayment for X amount of students with X amount, a lot of those people might not reap the benefits of that announcement because either they don't have access or they don't qualify for this particular program. So there's a lot of barriers within that when you're looking at announcements like that.
So that still doesn't mean that he's going to completely wipe it away.
No.
It just means that he's going to structure the deals differently, so that way there wouldn't be as much interest, or there won't be as much a hardship on those students. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to say. I mean, it also has been proven due to reports that Black students are paying off debts decades later, in comparison to their white counterparts and other students. And so it is going to be interesting to see what other news rolls out when it comes to student debt repayment and student loan relief. And it seems like more organizations are listening up and kind of standing behind these students and saying, listen, maybe we should cancel these loans, signing petitions, banding together, creating reports around why this is something that should happen.
Yeah. Shaquaya, when we look at, we had a conversation earlier this week with Sister Nkechi Taifa, who is, a scholar and a researcher, and she's been dealing with issues relating to Black women. And one of the big things that we talked about was the fact that Black women in particular have more debt than any other demographic, that Black women, and I'm speaking of in terms of student loans, Black women carry that burden more than any other demographic group. And I'm wondering to myself, like what needs to be done, do you think, for Black women to get to a place where they're not carrying that debt alone? Is it just government intervention, or does something else need to be done?
I think there's a multifaceted solution, or there are multifaceted solutions to that issue. It's worth saying Black women make up the most in student aid loans because they make up the highest in terms of demographic. We're the largest demographic that attend and pursue and attain undergraduate and graduate degrees. And therefore, the more of us that go to school, the more loans we'll continue to have. And therefore, I think there needs to be more institutional aid through colleges, but also scholarships and grants locally directed through high school affiliated programs and or community-based programs that work with high school students and rising seniors, juniors and seniors. I also think there needs to be a student loan forgiveness program specifically designed for minorities or Black women and people of color, should I say broadly, because Black women attain or pursue and attain more degrees, and therefore we burden or carry that burden of having debt related to our educational experiences. There needs to be a multifaceted approach in terms of how we are able to pay back our loans quicker based on income. Like, it needs to be a little different than the income-driven repayment plan. and I think this is relative, and I, not trying to make this a bigger picture, but when we consider the work that's being done around reparations now, I constantly think about how are we, or how is the commission that is working at the federal level to deduce what that proposal should be. I hope, and I'm questioning how is student aid going to be wrapped up into that. So I also think, as you were asking, Oyen, the question about where there are barriers with current repayment opportunities, also Black women not only pursue, attain, and actually get more degrees than any other demographic in this country, but we also commit ourselves to public service more than any other demographic in this country. And public service loan forgiveness is something that the Biden administration has expanded. It is something that the criteria has shifted and is created more opportunities, but there are also many barriers. As an educator, or as having a career in education and public service, that of which I'm about 7 years in, you have to have paid your student loans if you are in public service. The only way that you qualify to actually have forgiveness is that you were paying towards your loans each year consistently for 10 years. And we know that there are interruptions to reasons why people pay loans
10
back.
years?
10 years, right?
Life doesn't change for you in 10 years.
Right. And personally, I'm biased, right? In the sense that I've committed myself to public service for at least 5 years. I think I should have at least half of my loans forgiven, right? There should be some leniency with the public service forgiveness loan, in that it's not a commitment of just 10 years, because realistically, fields like teaching and serving in public service agencies, turnover and retention just does not even make that a possibility, right? It doesn't. The numbers show that people are not staying in these fields, and therefore probably won't qualify for this forgiveness.
Well, let me just put it out to the panel. Here is another possible solution. I'm glad, Shaquay, that you brought that up, sis, that there needs to be a restructuring of that, because one of our watchers, Janelle, just said, hey, they need to fix the loan servicing program and the repayment interest rate, as well as the administration of the public service repayment programs. So all of that, and this is the intricacies of being a part of a system. When people say some level of, there's systemic racism, systemic bias, that's the level of intricacies we're talking about. I mean, it's not just this one thing. It's like, you need to fix the public service student loan program and you need to raise the wage, and you need to make sure that the time for people to repay their loans. I mean, because it's like a domino effect. You fix one thing, it still might not impact significantly something else. So it has to create a domino effect. Now, I came across this and I'm so happy that we have this chance to talk about it, because from the school side, one school in particular, Hampton University, which some would say the real HU. I know, because y'all all Morgan grads, so y'all not in that stuff.
We're not even in the fight.
We're not even in the conversation. But what Hampton is doing is something that I think maybe other HBCUs can do. According to their reports, they have decided that there will not be an increase in tuition fees, room and board for the 2022-2023 academic year, and that all outstanding student account balances for the spring 2022 semester will be erased. Now, I want to share with you what the president of Hampton University said about this, Dr. William Harvey. Keenan, let's throw that on the screen, please, brother. Thank you. He said, in keeping with the university's efforts to help our students, there will be no increase in tuition, fees, room, and board for 2022-23 academic year. In addition, on behalf of the university, I am pleased to announce that all outstanding balances for the spring will be erased. We hope that this action will continue to assist our students and their families at our home by the sea. So, Sinedu, is this the step that HBCUs should start to take to help to relieve the debt for Black students?
That's a difficult thing to answer, because in order to relieve debt, you have to have good money, a good amount of money in your purse in the first place. And that's where this discussion becomes a little bit economic, because when you have an HBCU, for instance, that is trying to be competitive with other PWIs that are getting a higher amount of state funding and that have gotten a higher amount of state funding, it becomes hard to make these type of arrangements, if you will, without taking that risk of not keeping your campus up to date with dormitories and buildings, as well as increasing high demand programs. I think more HBCUs should attempt to do what Hampton has done, if they are able. But what I can say is a good part of being more able to make these financial expenditures towards debt is a lot of the private sector folk who are making astronomical donations. You see Mackenzie Scott, I think, gave Morgan State $50 million. And when things like that happens, those are what they're called unrestricted funds.
Right.
The school can do whatever they choose with that.
Good point.
Sometimes when the government fails to do what the government is supposed to do, this is a good time where a great citizens, private citizens, public citizens, whatever you want to call it, who have a large purse can actually make a difference by making nominal donations.
So just in that point, Oyen, just in that point of, you know, you having a major donor like a Mackenzie Scott, and I think that's a great point to bring up, Juneteeth, that if they offer you, that's money that is unaccounted for. That's like disposable income, right? And that you can help to relieve some of the debt and the burden. But I think, to Juneteeth's point, HBCUs are so strapped for cash for other issues that if you get a major donation like $50 million or, you know, $10 million, your first instinct is not going to always go to, oh, I'm going to just pay off everybody's student loan. We're going to just relieve their debt because we got the. Your first instinct is thinking about the infrastructure of the school, you know, putting some money behind your maybe your athletic programs to make them more appealing. You know, it's going to be putting some money behind the campaign to get more students enrolled. I mean, you got so many other things on the plate, and that puts the HBCUs in a position where publicly it sounds good, but privately hard decisions are going to have to be made.
Well, I mean, I think that's really excellent that you brought it up, and even to Juneteeth's point, I followed the Mackenzie Scott donations pretty closely, and something interesting that we found actually last year, towards the end of last year, when we were looking at CARES Act funding and COVID relief funding that was being funneled into HBCUs specifically by the government, a lot of HBCUs actually did do that. Farajii, to your point, they did say, you know what, we're going to wipe out student balances. We're going to do that. We're going to get these students across the line so they can graduate, because a lot of the things that we see at HBCUs is, you know, you're serving predominantly Black students who do have financial needs. And so 70% or so of HBCU students qualify for the Pell Grant. And when you look at the only thing that's stopping a student from graduating is like an extra $100 or $200 balance on their account, then a lot of these institutions, including, for instance, Virginia State, they spent around $1.5 million paying off the debts of approximately like 1,200 students, which was a significant portion of their enrollment, because they had about 5,400 students or so, and this was last year in the fall. And so you look at a lot of institutions that followed along. We saw a big trend of that last year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when those federal dollars run out. And when we look at the unrestricted funds that Mackenzie Scott gave to a slew of HBCUs and other kind of minority serving institutions, you know, a lot of institutions did different things with that funding, but one of the main commonalities we saw was towards their endowment. And so the first decision that a lot of institutions made was, we're going to put this money into an endowment where it can grow. But it's a tough choice as an institution. You know, do we serve students directly? Do we put this money in like forward-facing ways where people can see, oh, all of my balances have been cleared, you know, or do we invest in infrastructure? Do we invest in dormitories? Do we, you know, make our classes better, try to attract more better professors and better equipment. It's a very tough thing when you're looking at underserved and underinvested institutions such as HBCUs.
And let me tell you, so it's an even tougher thing when you look at the fact that Black students in particular are coming out of these, schools of higher learning, and they're contributing. The three of you are contributing members of society: writer, educator, working in the area of diversity and inclusion. I mean, contributing members of society, and at the same time, you and all of us, including me, we carry this debt, and it's not fair. I mean, look, let me just break down the numbers as we wrap up this part of the conversation. 86.6% of Black students borrow federal loans to attend 4-year colleges, compared to only 59.9% of white students. So yeah, I mean, the issue is so much bigger to Black and brown students, because we're the ones that are impacted the most, and it's so significant. The last point that we're going to bring up is that Black students, according to the Brookings Institution, Black students with a bachelor's degree owe $7,400 more student debt on average upon graduation than white grads. So the disparity continues to grow. I mean, even as you matriculate through your freshman to your senior year, the disparity continues to grow. And again, if Black students are coming out of these schools, adding to society, using their talent and their brilliance, then the government has a duty to ensure that their talent and brilliance will be supported and not broken because of the debt, because of slavery, which is called debt. Debt is slavery. Mm-hmm. It's slavery. It doesn't make you feel good. You wake up with it and you go to sleep with it. That is slavery. And so we have to push hard on this administration, because we can't talk about what's going to happen come November. We can't talk about what's going to happen in 2024. We have to push hard on this administration to make something significant and real happen for Black and brown students in this country, because we're carrying the expectations of a people, and we're carrying the debt of a country. And that's just not fair. That's not fair at all. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, we're going to shift gears. Let's talk about another educational issue. There's a shortage of Black male teachers in the classroom. Small number of Black male teachers are actually present. So what can we do to bring Black men into the schools? We'll have that conversation with Oyin Adedoyin, Juneteeth, and Shaquaya. So stay with us. That conversation is coming up next on The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to
to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A Black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on there.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig?
Folks, as we continue to have a conversation about what's going on with education in this country, we wanted to have a discussion about a very urgent need. Black men in the schools. There is a big shortage of Black men that are in the teaching profession. And today, we at least wanted to try to put a little further, another dent in this whole idea that that the schools are doing well. They're not doing well. Because why? Black men aren't present. Here to join us for this discussion is Oyen Adedoyin, who has written a piece about this, talking about the Black male shortage. And we're also joined by culture crew members, Shaquaya McKenzie, who is an educator and activist, as well as Shanedu Nkwafor, who is a diversity, inclusion, and equity specialist. So let's go to your piece, Oyen, on this, because you're saying that, and if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, in your piece, you talk about there are only about 2% of teachers across the United States are actually Black men.
Yeah, and so the statistic is pretty fascinating. 7% of teachers are, and we're talking K through 12, not non-colleges and universities, but 7% of K through 12 teachers are Black, period. And then 2% are Black men. So you see a huge discrepancy. And there's a variety of factors that contribute to that, from the lack of pay that a lot of teachers see to just representation in general in the teaching field. When you think of teachers, a lot of men, particularly Black men, think of white and women. And so they don't think and see themselves in that position.
So what has been one of the big reasons why we don't see Black men in the classroom?
Well, I mean, there's a variety of reasons why. One of those things is, according to a study that I cited from Donors Choose, which is an advocacy organization, one of the things that's interesting when we look at men and women and when they choose to go into teaching is that women will decide very early on in their education. So maybe like middle school, elementary school even. Whereas when we look at men who decide to go into teaching, they kind of shift gears in college. And so I actually spoke to a Black teacher in Alabama, and his name is Willie, and he was saying that he decided to shift gears. He wanted to be a historian or go into history, and he decided to become a teacher. But that wasn't until about late high school, early college that he made the decision. And so if you're making that decision later, there's just less likely to see an amount in that field. And the second deterrent is, of course, money. And so that's money to get into these programs and money to continue staying there, especially when the entry level salaries aren't particularly attractive.
Yeah, because in your piece you said that the average cost the average pay for teachers is about $45,000, and I think you attribute that to the National Education of America. National Education Association. Excuse me.
Yep. So that's national data that carried and ranged salaries from all over the U.S. entry level. So that's about less than 2 years of experience. That's what the average teacher is.
And can we just put it on? Can we just say put it on the record? That's still not enough. I mean, that's not enough because of the great work that teachers do. So we already know that part, but that's just not enough for in terms of a living wage in some of these cities. You know, I mean, if you're talking about, I mean, even in Baltimore, you know, 45,000 might be okay if you're by yourself.
Yeah.
But if you got a family to feed, then your partner, your spouse is going to need to chip in a little bit with that.
Yeah, we were just
and then let's talk about Philly, Dallas, Houston, Miami, Los Angeles. I mean, where the cost of living is already high. So what have you found to be one of the ways that the National Education Association and other educational institutions are trying to doing to try to bring Black men into the classroom?
So we've been seeing a rise in certain programs at colleges that are aimed at Black male teachers, specifically aimed at drawing them in. And one of the programs that I highlighted in my piece was the MALE program, so MALE at Alabama A&M. Because the interesting thing that the study also showed was that even though there's such a small amount of Black male teachers teaching in the classroom, they have such a profound effect on students. On average, Black men spend more time with students. They spend more time out of the classroom mentoring students. And even Black male teachers who graduated from HBCUs spend even more time, about 4 hours more on average, outside of the classroom, just mentoring and catering to students. So with all of this extra assistance that they're giving to students, a lot of these states are starting to pay attention, state governments. And so the program out of Alabama A&M, for instance, is a state-funded program that launched in 2020. And so they've seen about 20 teachers so far come through their program. And so they're aiming for even more.
Chiquay, I want to get your take on this because you also, I mean, you worked in a classroom, you put in that time. You continue to work with our students and with our children, but you know this shortage, like how from a teacher, a classroom teacher's place, was this discussed in the schools or the school that you worked in? Was there a conscious push to get more Black men into the classroom?
Absolutely. I work in Baltimore City Public Schools where, and through Teach for America, as I did not pursue education as a degree. By the time I decided that I wanted to teach in college, I'd already been in my junior year. And so I decided to keep with my major, which was English, and to go through a preparatory program, of which there are many, but Teach for America is the largest on a national scale. And so I'll talk about my experience and insights as an educator, and my observations and what I've learned from peer male teachers and their experiences and their insights also in terms of what led them to the career. But then I also want to take a step back and talk about the history of education and why it looks the way it looks in this country. So as a Baltimore City public school educator, the starting salary, which was ratified because when I started teaching back in 2014, the starting salary was at $48,000, and in the years since they've increased it to where it's nearly $50,000 and starting at I think $49,500. And to your point, Farajii, it still is a huge gap in terms of the cost of living and the salary that is not as attractive compared to other industries, especially that industries that have blossomed in the past decade, namely technology. And being that it is such a need in society, universities, or should I say higher education institutions, school districts, and non-traditional preparatory organizations such as Teach for America, other referenced in Baltimore City, such as Urban Teachers, they actually have specialized campaigns and initiatives to attract teachers of color. But as Oyen so poignantly described, is that many times for female educators, the decision to pursue teaching or education happens or takes place between middle and or high school. And for many, it still takes place in college, where they decide to pursue a program that will allow them to enter the industry upon graduation. But oftentimes for male educators, regardless of race, actually. It is a decision influenced by their own immediate experience in high school or in college from an educator of color, or excuse me, an educator of their gender, of their like gender, that they're influenced to want to essentially pay it back. Or as I've experienced and as I've learned from many male educators I've worked with, they graduated from college, pursued something else, but maybe took on a job working with youth in an after-school program or as a mentor part-time, and it influenced them to realize that it's something that they're passionate about. They see the gap and the need for their role and therefore end up pursuing it. But there is not enough attention in recruitment that happens at the undergraduate level, and there's also not enough attention to increasing advocacy for increased salaries that will attract more people and namely more Black males to the market. When we think and consider the history of public education in this country, there has always been a gap or a deficit of educators of color due to segregation. And therefore, what took place after segregation in terms of progressive strides made for more fair and equal education it's been grassroots in terms of looking at what's being done for students, but it's not been comprehensive in the approach to think about, well, who's doing what for student, who is, or what do we need to do to attract who our students or who the growing demographic of the majority of students in this country looks like. How do we bring more teachers of color into the classroom? That is, as of late, I believe, and I don't know if my perception is short-sighted because I came into the industry about 10 years ago, but that is when I started to see a more voluminous, mainstream conversation about the lack of educators of color in the classroom and what can be done to attract more. But it boils down to the money. It boils down to recruitment in undergraduate programs or in community programs where you do see more male leaders or mentors or influencers, and bringing them into a court in terms of what their impact is and what preparation looks like to be an educator. But then there's also the barrier of once you graduate, let's say you go through an education program in college, there's still the barrier that exists that you oftentimes have to get a higher degree in order to make the amount of money that you like, which, as we were just talking about, requires you to accrue more debt. And or there is a certification program you have to go through that takes more time and more money. And if you don't have immediate contacts in school districts and non-traditional preparatory organizations, it's something that is just a deterrent naturally, to have to go alone. So there is a need, there are solutions, but I think the barrier, as is the case with many public service agencies, is that they just don't offer the benefits are okay. Don't get me wrong. The insurance is great, but they don't offer the salary that is attractive enough or attractive enough for male educators.
And so, Juneteeth, if they're having a recruitment problem, and it is interesting now that you for the work that you do as a diversity and equity and inclusion specialist, that you're trying to make sure that places are including those who have often been marginalized, right? So what do school systems need to do to recruit Black men? Is it raise the pay? Is it help Black men to see that if they as an educator, as a teacher, they are giving back to the community, so they kind of pitch that side of it, that you're going to have that level of community service? Is it just love for empowering students with knowledge? Like how do schools go about doing it?
I think this is a very, very loaded question, a very loaded discussion. And I think Shaquaya put it very poignantly, but I'll say this because I'm not a teacher, but I do come from a teacher in my family. What I have noticed is something very interesting. A wise man once said that we don't have guidance counselors, we have misguidance counselors. What I find interesting when it comes to grade school level, there has been this push for just STEM. STEM seems to be the only sexy topic, for lack of better words, that is, pushed out of the schools, pushed out of our community. And I'll just speak with our community as one point of reference. And the thing is, we know that STEM is pushed simply because STEM may give you the access to better finances to change the life of your family and your community. So this is why, for me, I think it's not just only pay, because pay is part of it. But being a teacher has to also be respectable again. And with it being respectable, and with teaching being a respectable profession, this is my personal opinion, I think we might need to go back to the days where we educated one another, where that was important. Because I'm curious to know what is the percentage of that 2% that are of the Black teachers that are actually teaching in areas with a high number of quote unquote at-risk African-American youth. I would like to see those numbers as well. And when we're not educating ourselves, you don't get to look up to that teacher that looks like you, that you can relate to.
Yeah.
You can be in the city of Baltimore and have a teacher that has no relation to your background, your culture, your community. So with community dynamics, if you will, as a community, it's about time we talk about teaching and how it's important. And if your child says, I like teaching and I want to be a teacher, you don't nudge him or her and say, oh no, be an engineer, because that child can become an engineer and be this rich person working for all these huge multinationals. And then they'll have kids that are taught by nobody that looks like them.
I'd like to offer an interesting counter to what you said, Juneteeth.
Okay, sister.
I think that for as long as we can remember in our own temporal, whatever our relative perception is of a teacher based on whether the worst teacher we've ever had or the best teacher we've ever had, there is this glowing regard for the position of a teacher. And I love that you have, essentially preposition that we need to regard the regality, the significance of teaching again. But in my opinion, we need to make teaching sexy. We need to make teaching more relatable. And when I say sexy, I don't mean inappropriate, but in a sense that it is an honor to be able to impart, to internalize knowledge yourself to a degree where you're comfortable imparting it in a personalized fashion. And that is what students of color need, right? There's a lot of terminology in the field, differentiation, culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally responsive teaching. These are all social emotional learning. These are all relative to the humanistic development of each student. And I think that many times when people of color specifically regard their educational experiences, they're turned off because they have that white teacher in mind, or they have that bad teacher in mind, rather than thinking about the special role that personal connection plays, and which is the foundation and the fundamental brick of how one connects to education, is the connection they feel to the person imparting a lesson. And I want teaching to be, when I say sexy, I don't mean it in the provocative sense. I just mean it in the sense that it's something we aspire to, right? Sports is sexy. Music is sexy because it makes us feel free. It makes us feel creative. There is this idea that we are tapping into our highest faculties in terms of being able to relate to that. And that's what I want people to think of when they think of teaching, not the rigid, boring, kind of gray version of teaching that many people do assimilate with the field. I think, personally speaking, I think when they think of it, one thing that I was drawn to in being a teacher, or why I decided to become a teacher, because I wanted to pursue law when I went to college. I was not convinced at all to teach, but I started working in after school programs, and there was a connection that I made. I learned very quickly I could influence a kid much quicker than their teacher could, because there was a certain level of connection they felt, or we felt, with one another. And there was not this, as I said before, rigid fashion of there being an imparting or, an authoritative sense of teaching, but this, I created or cultivated relationships where I saw myself in students and therefore carried myself and imparted or projected onto them the best. I wanted to see their best. I took it personal. I took their best personal, and therefore they took it personal, and they were charged to see the best in themselves. So I just want it to be more sexy. I want it to be more relatable. It definitely, I don't know if it was a counter per se, but so far as we need to reinstill the culture of or the, should I say, the regard of respect and eloquence and sophistication that comes with teaching, there also needs to be that relatability factor.
Absolutely. And I think, Oyen, one of the big things that you mentioned in your piece, in your article, you said that any child that has one Black teacher, by the time they get to the 3rd grade, they have a 13% chance of going to college. If they have 2 Black teachers by the time they get to the 3rd grade, they have a 32% or 33% chance of going to college. So I think that is what, to Shaquaya's point, you're talking about. That's the power, that having that presence. I'm happy that I can say that my son has had a phenomenal Black teacher, Black male teacher, and he loves him. Like, he loves Mr. Hotwood, you know, and I love him too, because he didn't play any games with my son. He didn't coddle my son. He showed him the type of love that I would say, oh, okay, all right. So he gets a certain type of love from me, and then Mr. Hotwood continue. And I don't even talk to the man that much. So I'm just like, I love it. But I think that that's an interesting point, that the power of Black male teachers is the ability to take Black students to the next level. To have that type of influence is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It kind of reminds me a lot of my experience even as a student at a HBCU. You know, I'd always been studious and very energetic about education, but I'd only ever had white teachers. And so going to an HBCU, going to a place with teachers who looked just like me and who, you know, took it personally, like was so eloquently said earlier, my successes, you know, my failures, my doubts. It was just more of a holistic experience in general for a student to feel taken care of that way in an educational space if they haven't felt that before.
Yeah, absolutely. Keena, let's throw this statistic up there, this stat, folks. Take a look at this, because this came again from the National Education Association. Since 2014, ethnic and racial minorities make up more than half of the student population in U.S. public schools, yet about 80% of teachers are white and 77% of them are female. People of color make up about 20% of teachers. A mere 2% are Black men. So we're really at a I would say at a crossroads in this country. Either Black men come into the classroom and empower Black students and brown students and white students and take the graduation rate up, or we can keep going down this road, Shaquaya, Juneteeth, and Oyen, and see our educational system fall apart or not be as strong as it could be because Black men aren't there. My hope is, and Oyen, you tell me if this is something that, you know, is this something that we need to place in the hands of the Biden and Harris administration, or do we need to start looking within ourselves and say, you know what, we're going to have to step up as a people, as a community, to start doing better?
I think what we're seeing is it's something that maybe hasn't quite reached the federal level yet, but it's definitely a state level responsibility, as it seems. You know, the state governments and state allocations financially seem to be taking steps towards making this more of a priority, but there need to be more states that are putting and setting the benchmark higher for Black male teachers specifically. And it has to be specific and it has to be intentional in order to see this number change.
Absolutely. Janae checked in, one of our loyal watchers, says, yes, sensationalize the teaching field because it's been dwindling over the years, and we are the only ones who are going to inspire us, aka Dr. Greg Carr. Big shout out to Dr. Greg Carr. He makes learning so much fun. When you listen to him, he makes history so much fun, man. Big shout out to my big brother. Jay Nell checked in and said, that's right. Until this nation gives education the respect it deserves, especially by giving it priority in our budget, it won't be considered honorable. The GOP is hating on expertise. And I think that's what it comes down to. that if there isn't any real line item in the budget to make this real, we can have these conversations all day. We can bring out the stats. We know the dynamics. We know the impact. But if states, to your point, Oyen, if states don't make it real, and I'm saying we should increase that amount. Teachers should not be making on average $45,000 or $49,500. That's crazy. They need to be hitting over the $50,000 mark. You know, one of our watchers also said that if you're a teacher, you should not be forced to pay taxes. You can report them, but you shouldn't be forced to pay taxes. I mean, come on, you're going to force them to pay. These are the people that are shaping the minds of the future.
And according to Trump's
you got to tax them.
Yeah.
And you probably tax them at a rate higher than you would an
athlete.
No
question. That's what I was getting ready to say. When Trump's tax bill hit, I was still in the classroom, and when I saw how much taxes they took in my year, that year 2018, prior, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that not only was I coming out of pocket to pay for my own supplies, to pay for kids, all these things that I do conditionally as a teacher, I'm still not making enough. And I just told someone else today, the cost of living for the cost of teaching is higher than the cost of living for teaching for many people. And that is something that needs to be regarded, that it's not only the salary, it's the fact that we're taxed higher than the top 6% in this country. I also want to say, to your point, like, there is money that needs to be allocated. Campaigns have to become more, for campaigns that exist, need to become more visible, or there needs to be more campaigns that exist at undergraduate level, or I would even say at a community level, to inspire kids who are currently in systems to start thinking about how they might want to play a role in education. But what I appreciate about media, and I think the vanguard of the Black Renaissance that's happening in Hollywood right now, is that we see advocacy for some of these issues. Like, I haven't personally watched it yet, but I have a number of people that love Abbott Elementary in regard to figure that the kid that comes from everybody hates Chris. I can't remember his name, but
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
right. He plays a Black teacher in the show, and clearly there was some episode or his figure on the show makes clear the dramatic role that Black teachers have. I mean, we had Hanging with Mr. Cooper. I think that pop culture plays a big role in influencing the minds of people, influencing the minds of Black educators or those who could become Black educators.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oyen, we appreciate the work that you're doing, and thank you for using your pen to bring it out to the forefront that this still needs to be on our agenda. So I appreciate that. How can folks find your article for the Chronicle, Oyen, around this issue?
Yeah, well, that was an issue for our Race on Campus newsletter. So if you go right on the Chronicle's website and go to our newsletters, you should be able to access that site right there and read up on all of the issues that we're doing in regards to race and inclusivity on campus. Yeah.
Fantastic. Oyen, you are officially one of our culture correspondents, so we thank you so much for checking in with us and keeping us abreast on this and other topics. We'll certainly bring you back on very soon. Thank you, Oyen.
Thank you.
Juneteeth, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for your insight, and God willing, we'll be checking back in with you sometime next week.
Thank you so kindly.
Absolutely. Folks, stick around. Shaquay is going to stick around. We're going to continue the conversation as we talk about teacher pay. Let's talk about getting paid in general. The next discussion, should Juneteenth be a paid holiday? It's already been made a federal holiday by President Biden last year. Now cities and states across the country are discussing whether the holiday to mark the end of chattel slavery, should it be a paid holiday? What are your thoughts? We'll have that conversation. And also, let's talk about a crazy scenario, crazy situation, a nightmare wedding that started off beautiful, then went left very, very quick. We'll give you the details of that. So stay with us. Those conversations are coming up next here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the second hour of today's show. Man, oh man, I really enjoy having these discussions with my culture crew, with our culture correspondent, Oyenetta Oyen, as we talked a little bit about what's going on with student loans and, of course, talking about the shortage of Black male teachers in the classroom. Check out the first hour. If you missed it, definitely go back to the replay and check it out, because we would love for you to hear what was discussed. So much that we dropped in those conversations. But now, we want to move forward and have a discussion about Juneteenth. Now, we know that this has officially become a federal holiday because President Biden has said, yet the acknowledgement of what this country sees as being the end of slavery is something that's worthy of us to reflect and celebrate, which we should. We absolutely should. But now there is a much deeper discussion that's happening in state houses and in city halls across this country about whether Juneteenth should be a paid holiday. Let me just break it down for you. Keenan, let's show the cities that are taking a look at this idea. 49 states, while at least 49 states and Washington, D.C. recognize Juneteenth as a holiday, really, folks, only a handful have made it a paid observance for their state. Now, Georgia is the latest state to join Texas, New York, Virginia, Washington, and Illinois in this legislative move. So we only have a handful of states that are looking at it. Now, also, along with the state of Georgia being added to that list, New York City, the big city, they are looking at having Juneteenth as a paid holiday. New York City Mayor Eric Adams released a statement just a few days ago saying that declaring the day a time for reflection and saying that the decision to note it as a paid holiday is long overdue. He said, quote, "As the second Black mayor of New York City, I know that I stand on the shoulders of countless heroes and sheroes who put their lives on the line to secure a more perfect union. Now is the time for me to do a small part and recognize one of our nation's greatest wrongs." He said that people across the country, all races, nationalities, and religions unite on this day to truthfully acknowledge the stain of slavery and celebrate the countless contributions of Black Americans. It's time for our city to finally do what's right and officially designate Juneteenth as a city holiday. So he's looking to do that. Nashville Mayor John Cooper promises to sign an executive order recognizing Juneteenth as a paid city holiday for city workers, including non-civil servants. That was scheduled to happen yesterday. So cities are starting to look at it. And I'm just posing a question: should Juneteenth be a paid holiday? Let's bring back Culture crew member Shaquaya McKenzie, who is an activist and an educator and future lawyer. Shaquaya, this is a conversation. I think this is something that I think is worthy of discussion, and I think a lot of cities are trying to figure out both the financial impact, the legal impact, and the cultural impact, which is why I think they're having these conversations in April to get prepared for what can happen on June 19th, 2022.
Agreed. We know that the considerations in terms of the fiscal impact on government agencies, in addition to corporate entities, needs to be surveyed. But it is without question that if we can observe the date that most people believe this country symbolically became a country, which is the 4th of July, there absolutely should be consideration given to Juneteenth, because we have to acknowledge that it is the mistake of patriotic propaganda to have painted the idea that the Civil War ended in 1863, right?
Yeah.
But we have to acknowledge that the original sin of this country carried on despite what the majority, or what I should say, the Union win symbolized for the fight for the Civil War. And it took 2 years for that to be recognized fully and wholly with the freeing of slaves or enslaved people. I think that it's a popular opinion. I don't think there's anyone that would turn down another paid holiday, whether racist or not, right? And so
Right.
I think that the popularity of the decision is going to help move it along. But I question that what is going to accompany the decision, if this is just going to be another excuse, essentially to use our capitalist habits to spend money and just have, symbolic gestures. I think was it last year or the year before last that members of the Senate showed up in dashiki?
Oh my God! It was last year. It was last year.
Yeah, so we don't need that. Not only did it tarnish the favorability and respectability for some of those members who may not necessarily have the full buy-in from the Black community, but it tarnished what the holiday represents, right? It tarnished that which could be more properly received, I think, or more popularly received and fondly received by people who may not have known what Juneteenth was, or may not be immediately favorable to it being recognized as a holiday, regardless of, opinion for it. So I just hope that we can carry the holiday with dignity, that we as a community of Black people and as Pan-African peoples, because it's not just relative to the, freeing of African slaves. It's a Pan-African experience that should be celebrated. But I do think that it has to be treated with care and with dignity and with meaningful celebration.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, one is there has to be. I think that we have to first ask ourselves as a people and as a community, and as a nation within a nation in this country, how we want to have this day to be celebrated. Because to your point, I think that it can go left very quickly in terms of the level of exploitation of the day. You know what I mean? I'll never forget. I'm a Boondocks fan. Remember the show The Boondocks, Shaquaya?
Of course.
Boondocks, one of the most satirical, funniest cartoons.
Creatively
right?
genius. Yes.
Creatively genius. Big shout out to Aaron McGruder on Boondocks, right? But I remember they had this episode of Dr. King.
Mm-hmm.
They was talking about Dr. King had lived his assassination, has outlived the assassination attempt, that he would come back years later. One of the classic episodes. And in this episode, it talked about how Dr. King would come back to a whole different world and how we would celebrate him, he would be absolutely appalled. Because, you know, he would have, you know, there was a scene where this older Dr. King was approached to come to an MLK Day party. He heard it on the radio. He come and celebrate MLK. And it was just like, that's what happens to our history. That it gets commercialized. It gets homogenized. It gets exploited. Like, it becomes this other thing. And you brought up what we saw last year from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and others, you know, donning the dashikis. And I'm just like, whoa, wait a minute, hold up. Doing the dashiki thing, you know, getting down on one knee. And it's like, wait a minute, hold up. That's too much. It's too much. I think there has to be a way, and I know there is a way, Shaquille, that we can recognize pivotal holidays or pivotal moments in anybody's struggle, in anybody's history, in a very respectful way. There is a way to do it. Like, if the Irish community of this country say, y'all are diminishing the power of St. Patrick's Day, we want you to celebrate St. Patrick's Day like this, then it would be a different conversation. Black people, we don't say that. We don't say, hey, this is an important day in our history, therefore, we don't need Juneteenth sales, Juneteenth parties, you know what I mean? Get free, you know, this Juneteenth, get a free cup of coffee from Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts. Like, we don't need that. There is a way that government, people, the way the culture can celebrate these milestones in our history, where there's some actual learning and reflection, and there's some actual, you know, understanding of the struggle of a people that is still trying to make a way for themselves.
Right. Still trying to repair that which was harmed through a caste system that systemically still exists in many facets of society. And to that regard, I think there needs to be community, school, government, and when we talk about culture, we're oftentimes gleaning or reflecting on that which is propagated through media, right? Or music. And that's what I mean, visual arts, music, the arts, and media. There needs to be a comprehensive approach. Oftentimes, I think most people understand holidays or understand how best to celebrate holidays through school. So I would put that on the front, that there needs to be, the Department of Education needs to commission a committee on the appropriate types of observances for Juneteenth that can be shared and essentially taught across the country to school districts to enforce and kind of norm what should be expected. We know that around certain holidays each year, for example, Halloween, some schools who allow the observance of Halloween allow there to be Halloween parties, but that is a more frivolous, celebratory, you know, in terms of like historical relevance. It's not anything that is grounded by meaningful celebration. But when we think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, which I have to say, and I think many people don't know, Black people fought tooth and nail to even have the holiday, right?
Facts.
Because the government did not even want that. People don't even know Stevie Wonder's birthday song was created for the advocacy of the Martin Luther King. But happy birthday. People don't know that came because we were trying to make that a holiday, right? And when we got that holiday, we created parades. We started government commissions to be able to norm educational observances and practices in terms of how we would like for Martin Luther King to be honored. And I love your Boondocks reference because it's hilarious and it's truthful in terms of
very truthful
and how we exploit holidays as a capitalistic society. And I think that, you know, there's really no way around exploitation, whether it becomes a paid holiday or not. We've already seen exploitation as of last year. But what I think is in in front of us and what is possible with it becoming a paid holiday is actually having the time to create cultural practices and cultural celebratory forms, such as parades, such as what are other things that we do around holidays besides cookouts, right? Such as things that gather community and that impart that what we still have to do. It's not just about recognizing and observing that slavery ended on June 19th, 1865, but it has to acknowledge that even with the ending of slavery, there still remains, retaliatory, or should I say, punitive and predatory practices within within incarceration, within the judicial system. There's still, as we can name all of the inequities as it relates to legacy of slavery, but that's what we should focus on. What is the legacy of slavery, and how are we chomping at the bit to ensure that we get to a more just and equal society?
And I'm seeing, and it's like we're having this conversation, right? And one of our watchers, he's, they put out, you got to be stuck on stupid talking about a holiday while this administration is giving every other groups billions of dollars. And when you put it in that type of context, it's like,
Juneteenth should be a reparations.
It should be if you're talking about chattel slavery, and I'm very intentional about using that term, folks. So it's not just about slavery, because I just said debt is slavery. So we're under debt. So we're still enslaved. But chattel slavery is our people being in chains. But when you're talking about chattel slavery, there should be there is no stop, there is no pause and reflect moment in our history where we talk about, where we can have a real conversation. And like you just said, Shaquille, a real conversation about reparations, a real conversation about what is owed to Black people that undergone chattel slavery. Like, what better day? You know what I mean? There should be a day, at least. And I know we have Black History Month, but that's celebrating contributions. That's certainly talking about the trials and tribulations. But a lot of times that's used to celebrate the contributions that Black people that we've made in the society to the culture.
Correct.
But there hasn't been a day where we can have a very, very honest, open conversation about what happened to us during the transatlantic slave trade.
Agreed.
And Juneteenth should be used. And that's why I said, Shaquan, we set the precedence as Black people. We set the precedence of how we should celebrate that day. Yes, we should get the time off. Yes, we should get paid for it because we're still contributing members of society. We still add to the economy of this country. But there should be a day where we could talk about chattel slavery in a very real sense. That could be, as much as we want to call it the freeing of slaves, Juneteenth, maybe we should add something like the reparations day. I don't know. I'm just saying that has to be a much further push. I don't want to see Black people having cookouts on Juneteenth. I mean, we cook out.
It doesn't do us any good. It doesn't benefit us.
We cook out at a football game. We'll cook out on July 4th.
We'll cook out at Christmas in the South. Listen. We cook out at Christmas in the South.
I mean, what I will say. Come on. Depending on what part of the country you in.
I agree wholeheartedly with your point, Farajii. There have been attempts made at the rekindling, or should I say, a relaunch of what was once attempted or twice attempted successfully. I'm sure you're familiar with the National Black Convention that took place at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. Really, it was in the transitionary period between the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Panther movement. You had leaders as Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, Stokely Carmichael, or Kwame Ture. You had Fred Hampton. You had a number of people, and then there were the respective Black leaders on a local or state level that galvanized around this National Black Convention, where we talked about issues that were, federal, state, and local issues that affected the Black community, and had ideation, solution, committee-based sessions to have an ongoing process upon which, as a community, we organize around these issues. But it's long festered, and I've not seen. I often talk about it in very romanticized terms, in terms of wanting to see it again, but it is possible, and it absolutely should happen on a day like Juneteenth.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, let's put it where Ghost can get it, Shaquaya. Melvin checked in and said, Melvin Wright said, how can you teach about Juneteenth in schools with all the anti-CRT rhetoric?
That was another thing I was going to say. That is Juneteenth, in terms of education right now, especially in the Midwest and in the South, should be an offensive front or an offensive opportunity to combat the because we're using the terms anti-CRT, and let me say the GOP, or radical defenders of against CRT, which is not a thing in K through 12 schools. This should be an offensive protocol or opportunity for us to reinstill Black history into schools, or truth history, because I don't want to limit it to saying Black history, but it's more relevant to Black people or people of color in terms of the content, and also Jewish people in terms of the type of content that is being eviscerated from schools and textbooks. I think there should be an offensive front with Juneteenth observance. If it's going to be a paid holiday, kids will be out of school, but there should be a government requirement, and this is why I talk about the Department of Education creating a commission on how to celebrate this formally, how to roll this out across the country in public and charter schools. There absolutely should be some initiative around that to combat what is happening with anti-CRT efforts.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's going to be the spillover. I foresee this happening, Shaquaya, that as more and more cities across this country are going to, determine whether they're going to use Juneteenth as a paid holiday or not, right? We're going to see a wave of resistance from the GOP side, from the conservative group side, right? Over the next maybe month or two. Maybe the next month, we're going to start to see and some pushback. And look, I'm looking at what's happening in Florida right now with Governor Ron DeSantis. I foresee that he's going to say something. Tim Scott, any of these individuals in public and political leadership, I foresee they're going to say something about Juneteenth. Because you can't have a federal holiday. We know President Biden is going to, most likely, him and his staff and the administration are going to do some sort of ceremony, recognition ceremony, right, to talk about this. But there's going to be some pushback. And I think that for us, we have to, one, be aware of that, two, be prepared for that. Because if this is the holiday that is going to be, and I'm trying to think of the last major Black holiday that was federally accepted, which I think it was Dr. King, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, and it was.
And that was back in the 80s. So you're talking about nearly a 40-year gap. I mean, just thinking about that, 40 years where Black people have had to go through, we had to go through the struggle and experience and all of those things. And then we get this holiday. There's going to be some pushback on it. There's going to be some resistance to that. I think that right now we have to be so strategic about how we want this day to be recognized. It's hard for me to even say celebration, because we're still, because of systemic racism and all of the other issues that we often talk about, we're still suffering. Like, yes, we are not in the cotton fields. That's worthy of a celebration, but we're still marginalized, diminished. We're still suffering from injustice. I mean, we're still suffering. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And I hope that cities across this country, mayors and governors and states across this country start to say, okay, this is worthy. And I hope the Juneteenth celebrations that folks plan to have is not just about feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
Black people, we always find a way to feel good. This is one of the things about our culture. We will make a reason to feel good. Today is Friday. Let's have a party. It's the weekend. Let's have a party. It's sunny outside. You know what I'm saying? Let's have a party. I'm not into that anymore. Personally, I'm just not in that space. It's time for us to not just feel good. We can do that any time of day. It's time for us to be empowered.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for us to take the plight of our people. It's time for us to take that serious, because I'll feel good when justice is served for Patrick Lyoya. I'll feel good when we know the name of the police officer. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll feel good when we pass a voting rights bill. Then there's a little celebration. I can't feel good just because we finally recognizing something that should have already been recognized.
Yeah, I'll feel good when red lighting is reversed. I'll feel good when we are told to go to the polls, that something legitimately, significantly, substantially will happen that will change the quality of life for Black and brown people in this country. I'll feel good. I don't even throw in that we change the quality of thinking of white people in this country. I'll feel good when the whole purpose and outcome of Brown versus Board of Education is actualized, and no matter what zip code you live in, you have the allocation of resources you need to be able to pursue a life of quality.
Right. So let's hold the celebration for then. A lot of our people still don't know about Juneteenth, Shaquaya.
I know that too.
And so
that is also, there also needs to be awareness campaigns before we even push the cart to speaking about how we want it to be observed. There has to be an awareness campaign driven even harder. I agree. It started well last year, and I have no doubt that between social media and schools and or should I say workplace environments and cultural efforts being taken, shout out to Juneteeth, around DEI, it will continue to see that happen, but the conversations like this also have to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a final pause, another pause. When we come back, let's switch gears. I'm going to share with you a crazy, crazy story about what happened at this wedding, and I'm going to pose some questions around it. So I'll give you the details of that. Also, we got my last word for the week. So stay with us. Those things are coming up next on The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Like, wow, Roland was amazing on there.
Hey, Black, I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig?
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
Folks, imagine this. A friend of yours, or really a colleague, has invited you to her wedding. Now, you know this colleague because you guys have, work in the same circles. You are a business owner. She's a business owner. And, you like her. You trust her. And when she invites you to the wedding, you feel honored. You feel happy. You feel like, you know what? This is not just a business relationship, but this is also leaning and working toward a personal relationship. You get to the wedding, and guess what? The wedding is beautiful. It's on the outskirts of Orlando, Florida. You're seeing the water. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. Everything seems picturesque. The spirit of everyone there is high. People are excited. Your friend is the bride of this wedding. And she is absolutely gorgeous. Everything is laid out. You can tell that money has been spent. All the details have been considered. So once the proceedings go forward, you're just looking forward to having a great time. The nuptials are said, the kiss has happened, and guess what? It is time to have fun. So all of these things are happening. And you're thinking to yourself, what a great wedding. What a beautiful expression of the union of my friend and her husband. Where is the food? That's what you're thinking next. Where is the food? So when it finally comes down for the food to be served, it looks delicious. The perfect type of food for a perfect day. You have bread, you have pasta, you have all of the trimmings of some great food. And in a matter of moments, everything changes. People, even though there's a DJ playing music, even though the weather is nice, the venue is laid out beautifully, people eat a couple of bites of the food and they just sit there. No one's on the dance floor. No one's snapping their fingers or tapping their feet. They just sit there after eating a few bites of food. And then you feel it. Your mind takes you into a place that you never thought you would be. Essentially, you're high. This is just the situation that happened to one woman who was invited to her friend's wedding. She was given the opportunity to be a part of this beautiful union. And then when the food came out, she got high. 60 to 70 people got high at a wedding that happened back in February. And it is now just being discussed. And it's not just a typical high. Whatever the food was laced with, the cannabis that was used to be in the food takes people over. Men, women, elderly, and there were even some children that were present at the wedding, but they're still trying to figure out if children took in the food. This is the scenario, folks. I want to bring back Culture crew member Shaquaya McKenzie as we talk about the unfortunate, crazy circumstances of one lady by the name of Miranda Katie, 38 years old, as she attended this wedding on February the 19th outside of Orlando, Florida, where guests fell ill soon after eating a dinner of salad, pasta, and lasagna that had been cooked with marijuana. What? Like, Shaquaya, part of me, when I was trying to figure out whether we should have a discussion about this story, I was like, Farajii, what do you want this story to be? What should the conversation be? And I said, okay, let's have a conversation about what should be the punishment. Mm-hmm. And can you, here's what I'm posing, folks. How do you trust after you've been violated like this? This is a woman, Miranda Katie. This is what she said about her experience of going to her friend's wedding. And her friend, and check this out, folks. The fact that the food was laced with marijuana, the bride knew. And she conspired with the caterer. All these folks at the wedding, this was the wedding of a white woman. And she conspired with the caterer, who was a black woman, to lace the food with marijuana. Keenan, can we put up what Miranda Katie said? She said, quote, we're all at events and gatherings regularly talking about her relationship with the bride. She said, crossing paths monthly, quarterly is a regular thing in this town. The bride has a great energy and vivacious personality. It was pretty traumatic, emotionally traumatic. She said, I'm the type of person to walk into a room and everyone's my friend. To be violated this way from someone you like and trust is really hurtful. I didn't have an option or say. Even if people avoided things like the olive oil, it was still in the bread, in the pasta. Shaquaya,
there are a few things.
What the hell would you do?
There's a few things I'm taking apart, and I'm just going to give it to you as it's coming to my head. If it was this potent, nobody tasted it, that's one. Two, back up for a second. Talking about punishment and consequences. If the bride requested this order from the caterer, I do not think the caterer should be held responsible. Though I understand the statute of tampering with a federal one scheduled drug carries up to a maximum of 30 years in prison. It doesn't matter who did it, who commissioned who to do it, who paid who to do it. It was done. by the Black woman. So I hope when people hear me, they're not thinking that I'm petitioning a consequence for the caterer because she's Black. I am just thinking of the conditional responsibility that lays at the feet of those who invited the guest to have this meal and have this experience, which is interesting for me. The bride was arrested, but not the husband. So that indicates that the bride conspired in her mind. She conspired in her mind that this was an element of her wedding that she wanted, and albeit for her personal, whatever her personal inventory was in terms of why she wanted it, whether she thought people would chill, whether she thought it would be a good joke, it was completely insensitive to think or consider those who have, elderly, those who have to take medication. Hopefully the children didn't digest the weed-laced food, but it's just unfortunate that something that otherwise, I think if you put it online, it's just a running joke because weed, in the sense that it's so culturally acceptable.
Right.
There's this idea that there's no big deal, but when you smoke weed versus when you ingest weed, and depending on the type of weed it is, it can be a very extreme experience. People, weed does alter your heart rate. There can be, depending on the strain of weed, there can be hallucinogens, certainly paranoia, and anxiety.
And so check this out, and Shaquaya, to that point, like, I think you hit the nail on the head, because that's one of the reasons why I was like, okay, how should we have this conversation? Because marijuana, cannabis, is so culturally acceptable right now. We've talked about that, right? We're literally talking about a substance that is being discussed to be legal in this country, which may be soon, right? But the fact of the matter is, I didn't see this story as a cannabis story as much as it is about trust and the violation of trust.
Agreed. I think it is.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, suppose it wasn't cannabis, but something much more severe. Could have been some sort of LSD.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Or something more topically acceptable, like ibuprofen, but I still don't want someone crushing up ibuprofen in my food and giving it to me without telling me.
Giving it to me, for one, without me knowing.
Right.
And then for two, I mean, you got 60 to 70 people at this wedding. Like I said, men, women, elderly, and children. You putting this, I mean, you cooking the lasagna, the salad got it. She said the olive oil every element, every part of the menu.
No, it was a completely infused meal.
Completely infused with cannabis. And it's like, what were this caterer and this bride, what the hell were you thinking?
I question if the caterer asked if the guests would know. Presumably, if I'm a caterer and a bride commissions me to be the vendor for her wedding, and she specifically requests an infused meal, it is my assumption that she has the waived rights of her guest. It is incumbent upon me to check, but it is my assumption, right? Because it's such a bizarre request to make a meal for 70 people at a wedding for it to be infused. One, that's not cheap. And two, I would assume that there is agreement to this, or that it is okay. And it just is, it's just wrong. On behalf of the guest, I'd like to assume it's okay for me to say they'll never be attending any of her events again if she is not sent to prison.
Right. She's facing jail time.
Definitely. But I think that it will invoke in them, respectfully, paranoia and or skepticism about other large events they would attend, which is just not fair because it's trauma,
So, and that's the other part about it. Like, and I know some people might push back on this. Potlucks. So sorry.
I don't trust potlucks.
I can't do it. I
don't trust potlucks for.
I can't do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm at a point right now because my body is the way my body is set up, Shaquaya, that I need to have a level of accountability of who did what. You know what I mean? Like, when you cater somebody, at least you know, outside of what this woman did, but at least you say, okay, this is the caterer. If I have a problem, I have somebody that's going to be held accountable for it, right? Because I tasted the food came from the caterer, she's the caterer. Right. Potluck, you don't know. I don't know. And I think that's the thing. Like, this would make me so paranoid that I couldn't even trust a friend inviting me over to a small dinner. I would be like, no, I can't do that. I can't do it. Farajii, what happened?
But it's such a rare and bizarre occasion. I'd hope people don't take this story to lace their concerns. Rightfully, you should be skeptical about, as you said, Farajii, unless you can truly identify where the food source is coming from. If you're not attending a restaurant, you know where it's coming from the kitchen directly. There's grounds to be skeptical of all of it, but I hope it doesn't lace people's concerns too much, because I've never heard of anything like this prior to this.
I've never heard of it. Matter of fact, the reason that this story comes up is simply because yesterday, the woman, the bride, and the caterer were charged. They were charged yesterday with delivering marijuana and tampering with guest food, along with the misdemeanor of culpable negligence. Culpable negligence. Break that for. I want you to. I know what you know. I know you know what that term means, Shaquaya. So that means that they knew, right?
You intentionally put people in harm's way and did not care to. So culpable negligence is, in short, doing harm intentionally without providing recess or occasion for the person upon which you are intending harm against to have an opportunity not to be harmed. Right. So it is, and by neglect, it's also indicating that there could have been more serious outcomes of the situation in terms or related to people's health, and you were not concerned with that, right? You neglected the well-being of people that were supposed to be in your care, so far as it relates to being your guest. And so,
right. So okay. So you knew. Now, here's the thing: the tampering charge alone, according to the documents, is a felony with a maximum penalty of up to 30 years in prison for each woman. Now, I don't think they're going to get 30 years,
right?
But that is a serious penalty. I did not know. I mean, I've heard of food tampering, but I didn't know it carried.
I didn't either.
Up to 30 years in prison. I mean, can you imagine being in prison for food tampering, and you might be in prison longer than murderers,
or longer
than just as long as a rapist?
Because is this tampering? I wonder if it applies to roofies or to drug-induced.
It probably. Well. And so my question would be, Shaquaya, do you think that is too severe for a situation like this, or is that just what these women should be facing?
I think it's the sentence window, and the maximum of that is severe. I think that if neither one of them should have, especially if they don't have prior misdemeanors or felonies, they absolutely should not get 30 years in prison. Now, I'd like for there to be room to think about, probation, I'm not sure how
no type of community service involving food.
Not community service, but like a commuted sentence after a certain period, maybe 8 to 12 months. But it's very hard for me to think about the maximum of this penalty for this case, even though it does, there was harm. So I'm not trying to excuse that. And I certainly wonder what the guest of this wedding believed the right punishment would and should be. For the woman that was speaking in the article, she speaks more emotionally than more logically about what she thinks the consequence should be. She just knows that she was hurt, and it's hard for her to know that she was hurt by someone she trusted. But I doubt if all of these people that attended the wedding presumably loved or cared for this couple, they would want to see her in prison for long, and therefore there's room to think about, to follow the case and really see what people go on the stand and say.
Let me tell you, if that happened to me, or if it happened to a family member of mine, or say my grandmother, because like I said, there were elderly people there.
Right.
Imagine this happening to your grandmother. I would want to issue some street justice first, and then let your ass sit in prison.
You definitely got to go.
You know what I'm saying? You be like you gotta get that at least that like you crazy. And I know that to Miranda Katie, she was like, I didn't even know. They didn't even ask me. Like some of these people probably would have gone along with it. Like, put a little something extra in my plate.
Cracking up as you were introducing the story, because I was rereading the story and looking at the anecdote from the individual who attended, and it's just, I think it would not have been an issue if they forewarned people and gave them the option to participate in the mill or not. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and therefore they're going to have to suffer the consequences. We shall see what those are.
Let me tell you something. People, and Christopher Perkins say, no, you should never play with anyone's food. Lock her up for 30 years at least. Let me tell you something. Christopher, like, lock her up for 30 years at least.
Well, I don't know why we even talking about,
black people,
black people say,
go all in.
We ask anybody black, they're gonna be like, what? My food? Lock
right.
Up. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, all due seriousness,
yeah,
like the level of trust in violation I would feel would be way off the meter. I wouldn't be able to trust you. I wouldn't even be able to trust anybody. And it only takes one, right? I mean, this is a very serious incident. I'm not trying to make any light of the situation, because it could have gone left much more than it had. But I would not be able to trust people. I know I wouldn't. I'd be like, I went to a wedding thinking one thing, and I come back hot. Look, the lady Miranda Katie said that she felt like she was literally about to die. That's how serious it was. She must not have been a cannabis user, because she's like, she felt literally like she was about to die. So much so that she posted on her phone, she left a message in case I died, somebody can know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's serious.
Yeah.
That is absolutely, and I mean, for people, and I've heard, and I'm sure you probably heard stories, Shaquaya, of people who have done things to people's food, and you know what I mean, or just done things like pranks and stuff. And nowadays, you can't do that to people, man. You got to be very, very mindful that some stuff, I get on my children about pranks and stuff, because some stuff stays with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You because you tap into a certain, like, you can create a fear, or you tap into somebody's fear when you do certain things like that. And that's the very serious side of it. That's the very serious side of it.
It is. I pulled a really bad prank as a kid one time, and it scarred me for life to know how not to play with people. And it was with food, ironically, but not used correctly. So I'll leave spirit. Right. But there's what you
did it leave a scar on the person you pranked?
Yeah, I was at a friend's. I was like 6 years old, and we were playing with everybody.
You wouldn't be a friend of mine, Shaquaya.
No. Everybody who goes to sleep first gets messed with. And in my 6-year-old mind, people were like putting toothpaste and ketchup on people's face, and I was like, "Oh, hot sauce!" And I put hot sauce on someone's face, and it got in their eye, and it was. Yeah, no, we don't play with people's food. We don't play with food on people. We don't. I was 6. Don't judge me. I was 6.
Oh, we would not have been friends.
No. The girl
no. Even 30 years later, I'd be like,
her in years, but guarantee
like, hey, so we cool?
Sorry,
like,
Dominique.
Never cool,
If you're watching this, my bad, Dominique. You know it was. I was 6. It wasn't there. I was not there. But you don't play with people's food. You don't.
All right, so. I hope Miranda Katie and all those folks that went to the wedding of this lady, of this bride, really find. I mean, seriously, I hope they are all right. But more importantly, don't lace people's food with cannabis. I think that should be I feel like that should be pretty obvious. But I just want to make sure that for any watcher out there, don't lace anybody's food with cannabis.
Yeah, no, it's just
don't
not
do those things. Don't lace people's food with nothing other than flavor and good seasoning. That's all I'm gonna say. Shaquaya, I appreciate you.
Always appreciate you,
Shaquaya McKenzie, who is an activist, educator, and future attorney. Thank you so much for being so good for the culture.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, folks, I did not get an opportunity to share with you my last word, but I will just simply say, let's not take our foot off the gas just yet. We got so many things that are happening, and the conversations that we've actually had over this past week have been phenomenal. I'm still inspired by the lovely sisters, Lena and Erin Bowman from Sister Sweets, talking about youth entrepreneurship. I'm still inspired by that. And so there are so many things that we're doing right now that we can be a part of, but more importantly, things that you should know to not get comfortable. Don't get comfortable with where you are and what you're doing. You and I trust and believe. I ask myself every day, what can I do better? What can I do more of? And so I encourage you to do the same thing. So thank you so much for tuning in. As always, of course, Black Star Network, we need your support. So log on to our website at blackstarnetwork.com. Support us, Black-owned media, unlike any other Black media that you've come across. We are certainly unapologetic and unfiltered, and we need your support. So go to blackstarnetwork.com, download the app for free, and show your love to Black-owned media. All right, folks, stay tuned. Up next is my big brother, Brother Roland Martin, with Roland Martin Unfiltered, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk to each other on Monday. Monday, we got a great show for you. We got to talk about some of the latest audio coming out of Washington, D.C., where Kevin McCarthy has been heard saying that Donald Trump is sorry, feels somewhat responsible for what happened on January the 6th. We want to talk about when big things like this happen and they stay concealed, the impact that it has on the American people. I want to have that conversation on Monday. So that's coming up. But as always, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your family time, and God willing, we'll reconnect on Monday. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk Monday for another exciting edition of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Peace.